Texas Longhorns find themselves in the SEC championship in their first year in the conference, and it's a familiar foe they will take on, the Georgia Bulldogs, in a rematch from this game earlier in the season. Helping us break it all down from the Texas perspective, he's the host of Game Time on 102.7 ESPN Austin. Erin Hogan joins the show for the first time ever. Erin, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time. Excited to break down Texas, excited to talk this game, and really happy to have you on the airways, my friend. What's going on?
Well, thanks, man. I'm proud of you guys blowing up. And, we kind of, you guys launched SEC Unfiltered, and the station I'm on kind of came online not far ahead of that. So, man, we're just growing with the Longhorns and the SEC. And what a ride it's been so far. You and I, broke bread at the SEC Media Days, and here we are, man. A lot of people thought it could be Georgia and Texas, and here we are. I really was, was impressed with the entire arrangement coming out of the Big 12. It was just like moving up to the big leagues as far as media coverage, and but it's been pretty cool to see the Longhorns navigate it. Obviously, Georgia has had their ups and downs, but here they are. The preseason picks have made it to Atlanta, so it should be fun on Saturday.
Yeah, Erin, to your point, it was great to link up, obviously, at SEC Media Days. And even with the chaos and the madness and everything that's taken place in this 2024 season, I think this is the matchup that most expected us to get, Georgia and Texas. And, again, we find ourselves here the second time these two teams have played each other. And I want to start there. When you look at this Texas team, let's actually go to the end of the season, obviously coming off the Lone Star Showdown. The last few weeks, Texas has really caught fire since that Georgia game, which took place Saturday, October the 19th. Erin, what have you seen from this team down the stretch? Obviously, in the final ball game, Texas takes down Texas A&M 17-7. Trey Wisner, a big reason why. The defense, I think, though, has been the story, Erin, of these last few weeks. It's kind of like we knew Texas's defense was good, but, Erin, over the last few weeks, it's gone from good to, I think, being considered maybe the best in all of college football.
Yeah, obviously being on the ground in Austin, we've kind of tracked that all year long. And there was a fair point. Longhorns have had 2 bye weeks like everybody. And after the first bye week, they were 5-0. And their defense was, rock'em sock'em. They're number 1, number 2 in the country. But it was fair to say, well, who have they played? Because the first 5 games, UTSA, Colorado State, Michigan was supposed to be the big tester. We know their offense isn't very good. And so, it's fair to withhold judgment. And then the Oklahoma game, they held them to 3. Their offense struggles. Vanderbilt, put 24 on Texas, but, a couple of those were short field tip drill, drives. And there was a late score down 10 points that, made it to 24 for them. Then the Georgia game came, and we'll get into that one more coming up. But after that next bye week, they really have, it's a sign of any championship team. They've gotten better as the year's gone on. And the one thing that really happened, Chris, coming out of the second bye week and the Georgia loss, the Georgia Vanderbilt stretch, is Steve Sarkisian. I give him a lot of credit being an awesome offensive guy. They evaluated their team at the second break and said, you know what, we can win with our defense. We don't have to be lighting up the scoreboard with our offense. We can win if we develop our run game behind Trey Wisner and this offensive line and lean into this defense. Because, if you look at the numbers, they're number 1 in the country in points per drive. They're right there, about 18% of the time a team gets on the field and moves the ball and scores points, period. So 82% of the time they get off the field. They're number 1 in the country and allowing the least amount of explosive plays per game for the season. So they don't give up big chunk plays very often. They just make it very difficult on teams to go the length of the field. They're really sound everywhere. And that secondary, which was their bugaboo last year, Chris, has really improved. To bring in Andrew Makuba from South Carolina, from Clemson, to coming in back, local kid from right here in Austin, moving Jahdae Barron to the corner spot. Manny Muhammad, the young sophomore, is as good a cover player as there is in the conference. Jalen Gilbo at safety, Michael Taff. Those guys are and 3 of them are from right here in Austin, and they've worked out together a long time, Makuba, Taff, and Barron. So they just communicate really well. They don't break coverages and blow coverages. They hand off receivers, and they can all cover. And then that allows that front 7, headlined by Anthony Hill, the middle linebacker, and that pass rush to get home. It's really worked. They don't really give up big plays, and they don't give up long drives, but maybe once a game. So Sark is really leaning into that. And I really would give this offensive line a lot of credit because, when they came into the season, the idea was it was going to be CJ Baxter as their lead running back. And, he got hurt in training camp and was out, and he was going to be more of that between the tackles, pull and power play running back. And, that's really what they had worked towards. Well, he goes out. and Trey Wisner emerges as your number one running back. Well, they had to kind of shift on the fly and become kind of an outside zone team, because that's what Trey Wisner is really good at. He likes to get on the edge, get and cut up, cut back against those zone plays. And so that offensive line kind of had to shift their identity on the fly. And I do think it led to some of the struggles, through October, where they were still trying to figure out, and a lot of holding calls, trying to clutch on the outside and change it and adapt what they wanted to be. But this is what you're talking about. I think this last 4-game stretch, Arkansas, Florida, A&M here at the end. I mean, they've really, really locked people down. And then the run game has come like crazy behind Trey Wisner. And you combine those two things, a power running game, Joe Moore Award finalist up front, with this defense. Quinn Ewers has to really be a game manager for Texas to make a run here. He's really just got to control it and not turn the football over. I mean, that's really what made the A&M game closer than it needed to be. And that's really Quinn's job now, is to drive the bus here, not turn the ball over, and let this defense and this run game carry this team. And then you have the Arch Manning factor now, where I think that Arch Manning package will continue to evolve and add to their running game, especially in the red area.
Erin, you led me to my next point, my next question I wanted to bring up, which was the evolution of this Texas offense. I think, to your point, again, I was at that game in College Station, loved the way that Sark used Arch Manning, I think, in those different packages down by the goal line. But to your point, I mean, it's been at times, I think there were some of us out there that were frustrated. Maybe it felt like Texas wasn't committing to the run game as much, but certainly over these last few weeks in the A&M game specifically, I mean, 33 carries for Wisner. And to your point, it takes a lot of that pressure off Quinn Ewers, where, you're still going to look to him at times to make the big play, but he doesn't have to necessarily do it all.
Yeah. Well, and I think for your audience, I mean, he just has to be Stetson Bennett, right? I mean, he's got to be that Stetson Bennett role, where I need about 4 big plays from you a game and no turnovers, and we're going to be fine here. That's kind of the read. I see J.J. McCarthy a year ago at Michigan. What's what we're looking for. And to your point of the evolution of it, I really believe you're right about that. I think when C.J. Baxter initially got hurt, I think Sark and the coaching staff's mindset was, we're going to use our passing game to set up our run game. And, that was leading to some hiccups and turnovers. And, maybe Quinn Ewers, exposed him a little bit, as our, even fans here on the ground will criticize him. And that's where I think at that second bye week, they really leaned into the idea, okay, we're going to challenge our offensive line to be big and physical. We will still pass a little bit to set up the run, because they do still throw those quick throws and quick screens. But I think that's for Sark to get those defenders running side to side, wear them out a little bit, chasing things, whether they work or not. And he wants to come back with that run game behind that. So that really is the identity. And boy, Trey Wisner had the offense had 250 yards rushing against a very good Kentucky defense or front. They ran it when Kentucky knew they were going to run it. They ran out the clock against Arkansas, blasted Florida, and then you saw it with your own eyes at Aggieland. I mean, they pushed around a pretty physical front and outgained A&M by 200 yards and outrushed them. I think it was 200 yards to 240 to 100. So that's championship kind of football. Defense that stops people, forces turnovers on their side, and then an offense that can run the football and not turn the football over. That's really going to be the key for Texas. I know this stat, Sark has said it a bunch of times. In with the A&M win, their last 26 games, they're 23-3, and the 3 losses, including the one to Georgia this year, Chris, they've lost the turnover battle. So if they win the turnover battle, they win the game, and that's going to be the mantra for them moving forward.
Erin, before we dive into the nitty-gritty when it comes to this matchup against Georgia, I want to simply ask you, listen, I know Texas is a really proud program. They've won national championships, so just making a conference title game this isn't something new or maybe something that they're not going to hang the banner over it necessarily, but I want to get your perspective. I mean, how special or maybe how big of an accomplishment is it, the fact that Texas, in their first season in the SEC, when there was all this this doubt and there was there was criticism before the season, and of course you have the outside noise, you have it no matter what conference you're in, you're Texas, but how big of a deal is it that in their first season Texas is able to accomplish this goal of making the conference championship game?
I think it's pretty massive, and I think it's just I've been doing radio here in Austin since the mid '90s, so I've ridden the ups with Mac Brown and then the back downs with the beginning and end of Mac Brown, and obviously we know what happened in that decade preceding. I mean, it was really bad football. So for this team to go back to back at conference titles, to win the final Big 12 resoundingly over Oklahoma State a year ago, and then follow it up amid, because we go back to July and SEC media days. I mean, my comment to you, Chris, was, man, it's, Texas is an arrogant program. Their fan base is arrogant, whether they should be or not. So it was kind of arrogance meeting arrogance, because SEC fans across the board are arrogant. They're proud of their programs and they're proud of their conference. And I thought it was just so fascinating to watch that merge together, and to see Texas navigate it and, go 11-1. We talk about the schedule that they were delivered and whatnot, but they handled it. They didn't fall into one of those trap games like we've seen, Georgia and Bama and Ole Miss run into. They've handled business on the road, including Saturday night. So I think it's a huge accomplishment. Obviously, in this state, which you visited, to beat A&M and get to this game, which they've never been to in 13 years. Aggies have had a 13-year head start at this for Texas, and for A&M or Texas to get there in year one is it's a proud moment for the program and for the fans, and I applaud Sark and the staff, but it's also a dagger to the Aggies who, you were there. This is their worst nightmare, that we've had 11 or 12 years of prep, and here they come and they're going to go play for it. So, I know it's been discussed. Does it matter to win it or not? I think Sark really, really wants to win this. I think he really wants to avenge the October performance that they had with Georgia, but they're coming to win this game and to win an SEC title in year one. I think that would, really cement where Sark is with this program and put them on a course with, National Signing Day today as we speak, and they're loading up on another great class. Sark wants this to be the first of many of these runs, a la Georgia, a la Alabama.
Yeah, Aaron, to your point, I want to say, too, I think the worst narrative that people are trying to push this week is that somehow, some way, this game doesn't matter, or, they're both in the playoff anyway, so who cares? These two teams got here by going one speed. They're only going to push that thing in an overdrive, and this one matters to both sides. I think anybody trying to insinuate otherwise is just absolutely crazy. So anyways, Aaron, when you look at this game, again, like you mentioned, second time these two teams will have met, October 19th in Austin. That was a big one. College game day came to Texas. It seemed like the entire country was riding the Longhorns, only for Kirby Smart and Georgia to be the ones delivering the blow, winning that game 30-15. Most notably, they jumped out to a 23-0 lead in that game, registered 7 sacks defensively. It was really their defense that was the story of the night. What do you feel like Steve Sarkisian and Texas learned from that experience and that first matchup that they can take into this one and apply and maybe get a different result?
It's the great question. And I think it really was what led to what we just talked about, simplifying some things, getting back to running the football, being physical at the line of scrimmage. Because, my read on these two teams, now that there are 12 games played, Chris, Texas has been really consistent. They've really, that defense has been really, really good all year long, no matter who they're playing. As we talked about the evolution of the offense, so it's somewhat been up and down, but they're averaging 35 points a game, allowing about 11, and they really haven't had they've had one bad game essentially. That was October 19th. Georgia's been the opposite. They were like up here and then down here and then up here and then down here, and they had their best game the night Texas had their worst game. And I think that's the thing, as an observer and a fan, you're trying to get your hands around. Okay, how much of that was Georgia saw all that from College game day and all the burnt orange and the new sheriff in town, not kind of conversation. Kirby admitted after the game, oh yeah, we saw all that. We saw that we've been surpassed, and don't think we weren't paying attention to it. And how much of that was Texas? Because I know Sark has said, if you look at Texas now, Chris, they've the longest true road game winning streak in the country right now. I think there are 11 or 12 straight wins in true road games, dating back to 2 years ago. And Sark talked about and that's why, as the home team in this game, the designated home team, Texas, I think, has chosen to wear the icy whites. They're going all white road uniforms, because I think Sark likes that band of brothers mindset, that we're on the road. There are no distractions. Girlfriends aren't around. Family, we're locked in. It's just us 100 guys against the world, and especially playing in Atlanta, which is essentially it's neutral site but home field for Georgia. He really likes that. He likes what they had to deal with at A&M, and he thinks his team kind of galvanizes around it. And if you go back to the Georgia game, that's this kind of stuff when the Longhorns have kind of skipped a beat here last couple of years. It's been those home games where there's I think that day Sark had and the staff had 100 recruits on the campus. Either that just came in for the game because it was such a big game, on a non-official visit or official visitors. That's a lot of distraction for a coach to deal with, and hands to shake and parents to talk to. I do think some of that got in the way of Texas. It's not to take anything away from Georgia and their performance that night, but that was not a locked in and focused Texas football team that night. And you saw it. I mean, they were a calamity in the first half, whether it was communication issues or, blocking assignments or bad routes or Quinn making terrible decisions, and if you go to that 23-0 deficit, Chris, Georgia scored their 23 points on 5 short field point scoring drives. Everything was 35 yards and in because of the turnovers and the interception, the short punt and the return they had the one time. And this still goes back to that Texas defense that they kept them in the game to 23-0. It could have been 35-0. I mean, it really could have been washout. And they kept it to 23, forced a couple of field goals or 3 of them. And then they actually got that game back to 23-15 in the second half. We all remember water bottle gate and everything that went on that night. Texas had it to an 8-point game. And this is where you give Georgia all the credit in the world and why, they have the heart of a champion. I mean, Texas had them, they're down 8, backed up to the 10-yard line, and Carson Beck took Georgia, hit a big 3rd and 13, and went on a 90-yard drive, stuck it in the end zone, and they win that game, by the final score of 30-15. But who knows? With the crowd going crazy, Kirby's losing his mind. If they get a stop there, who knows? I mean, how that game turns out. It didn't. And I think that's kind of where both teams are. They're both going to fight for this thing. I think Texas can't play worse than they did in the first half. But at the same time, you as Georgia Tech has found out, even Bama this year when they beat them, you got to beat Georgia. They're going to, however bad they look for however many drives in a row, they have that heart of a champion, that expectation to win that Texas is going to have to beat. If they're going to win it, they're going to have to beat them.
Erin, you mentioned the inconsistencies of Georgia this year, and to your point, at their very best, I mean, they've looked like the national championship contender we all expected. At their worst, it's been a mixed bag of results, to say the least. So when you look at Georgia, though, Erin, specifically, again, this is a team you've already seen once, areas of opportunity for Texas in regards to win matchups based off what you've seen from Georgia, and are there any areas that maybe give you some concern from what you've seen of the Dogs lately? Again, you talk about momentum. Carson Beck playing much better over the last 3 weeks, 11 touchdowns, no interceptions, just under 1,000 yards for him. Anyways, when you look at Georgia, areas of opportunity, areas of concern for the Texas Longhorns in the matchup.
Well, I mean, I think the areas of concern, I'll start with that, are what gave Texas trouble the first time. Texas does like to, as I said, those little short screens, the quick screen passes. Those are really kind of an extension of their run game. But Georgia is so good in the flats. They're so athletic. They can run side to side. The defensive backs are so physical. A&M was able to force a bunch of negative plays on those, and Texas then kind of abandoned them. You expect Georgia to do the same thing. They got to hold on to the football in those cases. I just think for Texas to try to attack Georgia, they got to give Quinn Ewers time and be able to attack that secondary a little bit. I think there's some vulnerability back there with the matchups for the Longhorn receivers with, Matthew Golden, who's really come on strong here, number 2, DeAndre Moore, who's had a little bit of the drops here of late, but Isaiah Bond is still on this team and can go. Ryan Wingo, the true freshman, they can get you with their weapons if Quinn gets time. And that's what didn't happen in week 1. And then, can you line up and establish a run game with Trey Wisner against this front? I know that offensive line was embarrassed by their performance in that game, that they'll tell you that. And they really have made amends from that, because the other really good fronts they've played this year, Chris, Michigan, Oklahoma, Kentucky, A&M, I mean, they've handled those, and that's why they're a Joe Moore Award finalist. But Georgia's the outlier for them. I think you'll see their best brand of football. If they do, and you can keep ahead of the chains here against that Georgia defense, then you give Sark a chance to get in his play calling bag and Quinn a chance to create some explosives down the field. The other side around that is, Carson Beck and the offense have been so up and down. This Texas defense, as I said, is really good. I think they're going to be opportunistic. They lead the SEC in interceptions for the year. I think they're approaching 20 now interceptions. They're ball hawks back there. So I think for Texas's side, I think they see some opportunities. If Carson Beck puts some balls in danger, they're going to go get it. And I said it the night that Texas played Georgia the first time. In a game like this, it's going to be whichever quarterback plays the best and avoids the mistakes. And both quarterbacks came in as preseason, All-Americans, Heisman candidates, high draft picks. Both have kind of suffered that same fate of, they're going to make the big mistakes sometimes in big moments. whichever quarterback plays the cleanest football, I'll say that, is probably going to win this game and avoids those short fields and those big mistakes. And I think both Beck and Quinn are susceptible to that. Whichever quarterback plays the cleanest game, I think, gets out of there with the win.
Erin, that's a great segue into my next question. When you look at Texas, key or keys to the game, what must the Longhorns do to get their revenge on Georgia and be hoisting that trophy when the clock's at 0?
I think it's handle the crowd noise. And here's a little factoid for your audience. Texas is never played in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I mean, I know you've been there a million times. They've never played there, and there just was never a tie-in with a Peach Bowl or, a game. If you're going to Georgia, you're going to Athens. They just haven't played in that stadium. And so I think they'll adapt pretty well. It's not at the loudest place, but it's plenty loud. That'll be big key. And I think having just played A&M, because that's what if you're Texas, you're excited about the fact that your best 2 offensive line performances have come concurrently, the Kentucky game, then A&M, and now this one. So you've kind of stepped up from Kentucky to the Aggies, now to the Kings of the front 7. So they have to win first down. They've got to stay ahead of the chains. This can't be 2nd and 14. Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, and that staff too good with too many good athletes if you're behind the chains. So you've got to stay ahead of the chains, avoid negative plays to put Quinn in opportune situations. You convert third downs, in my mind, in football because you were good on first and second down. Against Georgia and against Texas the other way, you're not converting third and long very often. It's just not going to happen. You're gonna lose most of the time, and you're going to put the ball in peril. So whoever wins first down. So if Texas can stay ahead of the chains on offense, get Georgia behind the chains on the defensive side. That's Texas is their roadmap to a victory, and let Quinn then distribute the ball to these playmakers. And don't forget about Gunnar Helm, number 85, the tight end. He didn't make the Mackey Award 3 finalists. I think he should have. He's been great. And when they need a big throw and they need a big play, he really has turned into that. 2 things. When they get in the red zone, look for number 2, Matthew Golden. He has the best repertoire and chemistry with Quinn in the red zone plays. And then all the time in a big spot, 85, Gunnar Helm is a very vital key to this offense, converting third downs. Those 2 things. You got to stay ahead of the chains, get Matthew Golden and Gunnar Helm involved in this game, and then use your explosive guys for explosive plays. Jaden Blue, 23, the running back, can make an explosive play real quick. Ryan Wingo, the freshman, Isaiah Bond, those guys. But the meat and potatoes are going to be Trey Wisner in the run game, Gunnar Helm, moving chains, and Matthew Golden come red zone time. And then defense, I expect if Texas doesn't put the defense in short field situations, I think they can do a pretty good job of making it a long day on Georgia. I would also say one other thing, Chris. Texas has a real bugaboo. If they have one weakness, it's punting. They don't punt the ball well. Michael Kern is not. He's a freshman out of Florida, and there was a time this year when he got hurt and they had to go to a walk-on punter. That field position will become huge, and it was huge in the game because the punter for Georgia, I forget his name, he was awesome here in Austin, and he buried Texas back, which led to a lot of those first half struggles because they were backed up under their own goalpost over and over again. Texas's punter, meanwhile, the walk-on was playing that game, couldn't flip the field, and Texas was playing on one side of the field the whole half. And punting and field position, I know that gets boring, but that will be a factor in this game.
Erin Hogan of ESPN Austin does a fantastic job covering all things Longhorns. Erin, let folks know, in case they've been living under a rock, where they can check out all your great work, follow along, and listen in.
1027 ESPN on the FM dial. If you're in Austin, we have an app, 1027 ESPN. The app is free in your download. You don't have to go through any TuneIn or iHeart or anything. Just go right through our app, 1027 ESPN. You can find the website, 1027ESPN.com. I'm on Twitter. And all the at Erin Hogan, E-R-I-N, the girl spelling, but my parents would say the Gaelic Irish spelling. So it's E-R-I-N-H-O-G-A-N on Twitter. And I'd love to hear from all your listeners and viewers. And appreciate talking to you today, Chris.
Erin, always a pleasure, my friend. Appreciate you taking the time. Keep up the great work, and we'll definitely do it again soon.
Yep, we'll see you down the road here.